Hello everyone and welcome back to AoS Nagash, which is a channel dedicated to Age of Sigmar, and in this video we're going to be talking about why play Gloomspite Gitz, and I am very happy to welcome back onto the show Anthony from AoS COACH. How are you doing, my fine sir?
G'day. I must have done a good job last time because I had been invited back, but excited to talk Gits again. One of my absolute passions of my Age of Sigmar journey.
Fantastic. You're very welcome to be here. You did a fantastic job last time. I think we could have talked about 64 hours. So I think we did quite a good job trying to narrow it down. Hopefully we can do that with this Gloomspite Gitz video. So like the similar why play videos I've done, the idea behind this one is if you're thinking about playing the army or you've got a few units and you just want a little bit of motivation, by the end of this video hopefully you'll have that motivation, or you'll decide if this is the army for you or potentially another army might be better. So what we will be doing in this video is we will tend to summarise a lot of stuff, just because on my channel myself, I think I've got about near 7 hours worth of content for the Gloomspite Gitz from before, and then I know yourself, Anthony, you've done a up to 3 hour video talking in depth.
I've got plenty of videos, and there'll be more to come. So,
fan-bloody-tastic. Okay, so to kick off, what we're going to talk about is exactly who are they. So, Coach, could you please tell us a bit about the lore of the Gloomspite Gitz?
so I think there's only one way to describe it, and that is they get their moon sickles and they go stabbing people in the knees.
Brilliant.
Who are the Gloomspite Gitz? They are an old Warhammer Fantasy Battle army put on steroids. So if you are from Warhammer Fantasy Battles, you did have a goblin component from the Orcs and Goblins. Obviously, that book has gone through iterations, but you know, the squigs, the goblins, the spiders, some of the trolls from the old Warhammer Fantasy days have been brought over into this Gloomspite Gitz book. But we were really lucky, unlike Cities of Sigmar, we were really lucky to get a whole bunch of new range models. We got a terrain piece, we got a beautiful sculpts. You know, one of my personal favorites here is the new Mangler Squig. If you can see that, it's just a beautiful sculpt, and it's a great army. So if you are thinking about it, hopefully I can convince you in however long this video goes, because you will not regret this army. I have not regretted any time that I've ever played with this army.
It's absolutely beautiful, and I think they did for me. I've never really played Moon Clan, anything like that. When I was much younger, when I was a kid, I loved the Goblin models, so I had a few Night Goblins, but I think they've done a fantastic job here by refreshing so many of the new kits, but keeping that sort of thematic, fun, destruction, sort of like sneaky theme to it. Like the Mangler Squid, for an example. I've got another picture of it on the screen for the viewers. If you need a model to just scream fun to you, or you just know the rules of that thing are going to represent how it looks.
Yeah, it's an army that I actually think it's my best painted army. So despite playing humans and Cities of Sigmar in various iterations for probably 20 years, despite playing Death, you know, despite all the other armies that I own, when I look at my Gloomspite Gitz, they are my favorite models to paint. I think they're the most reflective on the table from a creativity point of view as well. And I think that is reflective of the fact that the models are just fun to build, fun to paint, fun to play. So whether you are a competitive wargamer, whether you are a casual hobbyist, this army definitely has things for you. Is it going to go 5-0 at a tournament? Well, that's up to you for your skills. But ultimately, win, lose or draw, you will always have fun with this army. I guarantee it.
Brilliant. And just to pick you up when you said about painting, do you reckon that's because you can be really creative and doing really bright colours? You can be a bit more, I don't want to say childlike, but you can sort of let your imagination go a little bit wild rather than doing all the sort of perfect uniforms of the free people? You have a bit more freedom.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think when I look at the model range, right, because, you know, I'll take a step back and I'll imagine that I'm a new person who may have seen some models at their local games workshop, or they've stumbled across your videos and thought, right, I want to learn more about this army. So the model range in itself is, unlike many armies, right, where there's an aesthetic. You look at the Ossiarch Bone Reapers and they all look and feel very similar. They're an Ossiarch Bone Reaper army. You look at a Seraphon army and you're going to see a very similar lizard type feel, dinosaur type feel. But when you look at this army, there is a number of different aesthetics. You've got these little goblins, and they're all in their little hoods, and there are a whole bunch of variety in that. But you've got this goblin look. But then you've got this thing called a squig, which is known as a squiggly beast for anyone who wants to know sort of like where that come from. And it's these. I don't know if you had this in your childhood, but they're very much like this hoppity hop, where this little bouncing organism, and all they do is eat, and they explode. And when I look at my Gloomspite Gitz, I've got purples and reds and yellows and oranges and greens. And, when they jump, there's smoke. And when I look at the bases, I have mushroom caps as well. So painting different mushrooms, and I'm painting this very dank, very muddy, very underdark theme because they come from the caves. But then you've also got these big, nasty, ugly, smelly trolls, and they're really big, and they've got, some of them are vomiting, literally vomiting. And they've got, little things that on them, and they are fun, but they're also as detailed as you want to pick on them, or you could go really light and go right. They're very contrast orientated as well, especially the squigs and the trolls. I think wonderful for contrast. But either way, they are a bundle of joy to paint.
Fantastic, and that's a good answer. I was just going to say what you were saying about contrast and what you can do with them. Really, it's quite a welcoming army for new players. In terms of, I think, someone could try and shoot that argument down by just saying, well, a brand new person might not want to paint 120 grots, but you don't have to do that in this army. And there's so many nice little details with those models that you just mentioned. Like I've got a Trop here who's holding a big boulder here, and has got a little, I'm sure you know the one with a little bird's nest on top of his head with a little worm coming down. Just all that little creativity that first time you look at the model from a glance you might not notice, but when you start building and painting you're going, oh my god, there's so many cool things. And it's not like Ever Chosen where it's like, oh, that's another bit of gold trim to paint or something like that. It's just got that extra element to it.
Like if you look at this Mangler squig, like I don't know if you could see it very well, but there's literally a dude holding on for dear life, flying like Superman, who's holding on to this, and I think that's the fun thing, right? You mentioned the bird's nest. You mentioned there are all these little Easter eggs across the model range. I will go back and just say that it is not an easy army to play, and we'll talk a little bit more about why this is probably not the best army to start with, unless you're just having fun. If you're picking this up for the first time and going, right, I want to be a competitive wargamer, and I haven't played Age of Sigmar before, it will be a steep learning curve, but you will have fun in the learning process, but it will take time for you to understand why things do what they do. Because one of the things that Destruction has and the Gloomspite Gitz has, probably more than any other book, is it is random. And there's been plenty of tournaments where I've been to, and one of the traditional questions you'll ask your opponent is, what does your army do? And my response is always, it can do this, or it can do this. It can be completely hot garbage and do nothing, or it can be the strongest model in the game. I don't know what it's going to do. There's been times where I've perfectly set up a charge, absolutely going to crush my opponent, and then I roll these random dice, because squigs move randomly. They don't have a fixed movement profile. They randomly move. So that Mangler squig that I showed you could move 20, or is it 3d6? I think it could move 18, or it could move 4, 3.
Yep.
And there's been plenty of times where I've rolled a 4 on 3d6, and despite the perfect setup, despite the perfect deployment, what can I do with a 4-inch move?
Well, that's it, isn't it? So I was just going to say, like, when it comes to all of averaging and stuff, I believe I watched your video the other day talking about sort of like mass hammer, and when you look into that, and I think on a 3 dice is 11 the average on a 3d6?
I believe so. 2d6 is 7. I think 3d6 is about a 10 to an 11.
So the amount of times I've rolled 3 dice and I get a 7 or a 6, you just can't rely on it. And but that's what we're saying, it's part of the fun. And another sort of very random army is Skaven. However, the caveat to that, I would say, is Skaven, surprisingly compared to Gloomspite, a lot of the time you can choose when you want to be random. You can choose when you want to take the risk. Gloomspite is more, it's just a constant theme throughout the army, and that's not just as a constant things could go wrong, things could also go very well, like you've mentioned. So it's just that extra.
There's been plenty of times where, like, for example, I've had some fanatics, right? And we'll talk about the units, we'll talk about the army soon. But I remember having this unit of fanatics. There are 140 points currently in the game. They basically have these big swinging, like, balls on a chain, and they just swing around, and they basically try to destroy your opponent. They're a glass hammer. If they take a hit, they're dead. But they can be brutal. And they do D6 attacks each, and there's 5 of them. So there's a potential of 30 attacks. They hit on 4s, wound on 3s, Ren -2 for D3 damage. I remember one particular game, I put those 5 fanatics into a Lariel. Out of 30 potential attacks, 5d6 attacks, I did 27 attacks. And I ended up doing like 35 damage to a Lariel. The following turn, I got the double turn. Then they moved into Durthu. They rolled 28 attacks. Then they basically annihilated Durthu, and I think some Kurnoth hunters with them as well.
You didn't need the rest.
Then there's been times where they've jumped out and they haven't hit a single thing. So that's the beautiful thing, is that you've got to roll with the punches. You've got to laugh. You can laugh because they do the world's largest amount of damage that you never would have seen, or sometimes they hit with a wet pillow, or they don't even get into combat, and all you can do is laugh. So if you are open to randomness, if you're open to making decisions on the fly, as opposed to, I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this, and you've got that set game plan, the set game plan doesn't work because Gloomspite Gitz does not adhere, even the Allegiance ability doesn't even adhere to certainty. So unlike, let's say, Deepkin, where you know turn 2 or turn 3 you strike first, there is completely all randomness in this, and that's what makes it so special.
And I think that's part of the beauty, isn't it? Because if you're not the, shall we say, the most competitive player, not going to tournaments all the time, you love that sort of, you may love that sort of wackiness of the army, and really just by the sheer randomness that tells the story of the battle. But if you do want to play competitively, you can take the random elements as a challenge and try to utilise, things may sometimes go wrong, things may go overly well, like you've explained with the fanatics. How can I maximise this? So it has appeal to both sides, I think.
Yeah. I don't want to focus too heavily on like completely competitive gaming, but like again, whether you're a narrative gamer, and this book has a wonderful narrative, whether you want to play for funsies or you want to be, playing at a tournament, there is something in this book for everyone.
There's loads of things, and I feel like I maybe cut you off at the start of the video because half the screen is just the model range. I kind of got distracted and you started talking about a mangler squid, so I think I went on tangent. However, with the lore, you were explaining it. So they were the moon, what are they called? The night goblins. They came over. Now, I think, what was it, in the Age of Chaos, they hid in all the caves and all the dark places of the realms. And now it's the Age of Sigmar. They're sort of expanding out, spreading this sort of fungus around the realms, aren't they? Do they have a goal, an objective?
What their goal? So they do, absolutely. And the funny thing is, though, so first off, what everyone needs to know about the Gloomspite Gitz is that they worship, or they admire and they worship, and their guiding light is something called the Bad Moon. It is a moon, but it's not like a moon that you know. And the moon, our Earth's moon goes across the world, and it's very consistent, day and night. The Bad Moon is from, it's essentially from the realm of Slanesh. Though people don't know that. It's very much based off Gorkamorka. So all of destruction worships Gorkamorka. And the Gloomspite Gitz see the Bad Moon as a representation of Gorkamorka. And each of them see things differently. So the spiders, for example, the Spider Fang, they see the Bad Moon like an egg, like a spider's egg. And they're waiting for it to hatch to Gorkamorka. But then you've got different elements that they're going to worship the moon in very different ways. So why the Gloomspite Gitz come out? Well, I guess when you think about this, during the Age of Nagash, or during the Soul Wars, Age of Nagash, the Soul Wars, what you've found is with the the unlocking of the night vaults and the essential magical disruptions in the mortal realms, that has really thrown off the Bad Moon, because the Bad Moon will jump between the different realms. It's very inconsistent, much like the Gitz, and you've seen that the Bad Moon is probably been less consistent than it's ever been. It's just jumping around. It's all crazy. And that's kind of awoken the Gitz, and it's woken the all the different models from all the different armies from the underworld and the caves, and they are coming out, and they've all got their different reasons, because you've got giants, you've got gargants, you got your spiders, you got your squigs, you got your Gitz, and you've got your trogs, your Troggoths. So they all have different motivations, but they are basically out there to cause destruction in the name of Gorkamorka.
Fantastic. I think that's a great summary. And so, with that, let's say still listening, you thought, you know what, Gloomspite Gitz, you're still happy with how they play. What would you say, going more into their army now, what their strengths are?
Cool. So what is their strengths? The first strength that the Gitz have. So we've acknowledged that they are a really fun army, and we've acknowledged that they're really great to paint. So from a hobby aspect, they are a wonderful army. I'm going to put that to the side, because I'm sure people who want to play with them want to know a little bit about their strengths. So the beautiful strength is that this is a really deep book. There are a lot of different units to choose from, and I've mentioned some of them. When you look at the book, they play to their style. So squigs are very random. Trolls are hard to kill. Your grots are just going to outnumber your opponent. When I run a grot army, I'm probably running anywhere between 140 to 180 little bodies on the table. And they are really hard to kill, because you just swamp the board with just little grots. And if you imagine the Gloomspite Gitz, or if you're imagining grots coming out of a cave, it's just an absolute tidal wave of greenskins. So they play like they should. But then you've got the spiders as well, and the spiders come into the picture, and they do a lot of mortal wounds. They're fast, they're going to be running over terrain, essentially like they fly, and they're going to get in your face and do mortal wounds. So if one of those themes sounds interesting to you, you can build a whole army easily in one of those themes. You want to run all squigs? Perfect. There's lots of different ways to build them. There are battalions. There's enough models as well to build an interesting 2,000 point list for squigs. But if you're like, I want to run goblins and trolls, I want to run spiders and squigs, you could make any combination, and that would also work. So from a book, you could stay in this book for a long time and build lots of different interesting lists. Or you could be a complete master and just focus purely on goblins, on squigs, on trolls. So I think that's the versatility. And because there's so many units, you can build armies that will handle the game as it evolves. So as Seraphon comes out, you may tweak your list. When something else comes out, you can always tweak your list. So there's often an answer for the problem in the game.
And it's that adaptability that not every army has. Some armies have, especially for this army that does not have sub-allegiances. Like if I was to look at Bone Reapers, and we take Petrified Elite to a side, there's a lot of sub-allegiances within that book going, what happens if the meta adapts even more so to movement? What happens if the meta adapts to anti-magic, which I feel like anti-magic will be needed going forward. Lots of different things, but because the Gloomspite Gitz don't have those sub-allegiances, the one of the books that don't, the way how their different units play can be a way to keep them fresh in the meta, to keep them up there. Is that something you would agree with?
Yeah, I would. So to use Petrifix Elite, that's where I want to go. Yeah. To talk about OBR, Ossiarch Bone Reapers. When that book came out, there is essentially one build that dominates more than others, and that is of the sub-allegiance, the Petrifix Elite. I'm not picking on them, but it's just better than the rest. When I look at Gloomspite Gitz, there is no one standout. When you look at all the Gitz players out there in the world, running the same list. While if I go to a Petrifix Elite table, I know for a fact they're going to have big blocks of Mortec Guard. There's either going to be Nagash or Arcane the Black. I can tell you there's going to be potentially a Harvester. Potentially tell you there might be 1 or 2 Catapults, depending if Nagash is in there or not. I can tell you there's going to be a Soul Mason. I know the list. With Gitz, you will find that every Gitz army is likely very different. And now that there's a current challenge, let's say Petrifix Elite with very tough saves. Well, good news. I can either tap into my spiders to get some mortal wounds, or I could go into my squigs to get some rend. Or I might try to body block them and just throw a big wall of grots and run them up the board as fast as I can. Because although they have an immovable wall with 20 Mortec Guard with under Petrifix Elite, I'm going to have blocks of 60 in there, and they've got nets that cause -1 to hit, and I can cause another -1 to hit, and I'm going to have more models around the objective than you are. So I can play the game just as well as you can. But then if Seraphon starts dominating, and I'm going, right, well, they've got some teleporting or, some deep striking salamanders. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, maybe my list changes a little bit. I can teleport myself with a spell called Hand of Gork. I can use fanatics who can countercharge and do some serious damage. So again, there's a lot of list variety in this book, and it's both a strength and a weakness, but you'll have fun either way.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And what I would like to say of that, because I know I brought up Bone Reapers, they're just a very easy example. Like I say, there's just one flat out one to pick, which is my honest opinion. That's boring in itself. We just talked before we started the video, I think we said how we both like to play particular armies where you can do lots of flavour. Because with Petra Elite, although that may be the best way to go, +1 save it's very solid, but it is it's quite a boring ability compared to, like we say, all the randomness in here. Now, like I say, I don't want to turn this into dissing Petra Elite or anything like that. That's not what we're doing. But I just want to say it's more fun essentially. I know I've already said that, but I think +1 save just a bit boring, really.
I think with the OBR, and again, this is not us slagging OBR. If you are an OBR player, this is not slagging you. But that book has one particular build that's stronger than the others, and that is Petrifix Elite. I can only imagine how cool the armies could be if you build it under a Crematorian or a Null Myriad. There are so many other different builds, but unfortunately the book doesn't incentivize you to play that way. With Gitz, and bringing it back to Gitz, there is no incentive. It's not like you must run a list with squigs. If you don't want to run squigs, don't run squigs. Your army is still as strong as it always will be. So it is a wonderful book in that way, because it's not forcing you down one particular build. There are battalions for each of the different builds, whether you want to go squigs or spiders and different things. And there's enough models in there to build interesting lists. So you're not being shoehorned. That's I guess the point that I'd want to make. It's not about Petrifix Elite. It's about the fact that you've got a whole bunch of diversity in this book.
Exactly. There's no build in this book where you're building your list and you think, oh, this is really cool, I want to run it like this. Or not just from a narrative perspective, fun, you can think, I could be competitive doing like this. You haven't got this nasty feeling, which I know I sometimes have in the back of my head when I'm building a list, which is, because I'm not taking it in a certain way, I'm doing it wrong. And there should be no point in your hobby where you feel like you're doing it wrong. You can do however you would like to. At the end of the day, some of us play more games than others, but I think 90% of us probably see the models often more painted up in a cabinet or on a shelf or something, or spend more time doing them than playing the games. So in an army like this, where you can buy and build and paint the models you want to game with, and they are still viable, rather than feeling like, oh, it's not the list that it's on the internet that everyone else is taking, I think is a really great opportunity. If I can compare it to an army that I'm currently building up, it's a Nighthorn army. To my left of me, I've got 40 Chainmail Horde that I'm currently painting up, and that is an army where, again, similar to the Gitz, there's no real right or wrong way to take them, and it's a great way. I'm going to, like I said, we're gonna take it away from funny death anyway, and back to Gloomspite Gitz.
Let me now bring home my point with this.
Yeah.
Last year at Adepticon, I got to play potentially one of the other, probably the world's most notorious and well-known Gitz player, and that is Nathan Prescott from the Honest Wargamer. Game 5 at Adepticon, Nathan versus myself. He played Gitz, I played Gitz. our lists were different. Now, there were some similarities, but even though Nathan and I had been doing them quite well and quite successfully, we both had different lists. So it just shows that this is not an internet list type army. You are going to build it in your own flavor. You will pick some things that work really well. There are some standout models, some standout spells, but ultimately, again, diversity is the key here. I hope the listeners have really, that's been nailed home. Is that it's a fun army, it's diverse, it has a big range. You can't go wrong.
Exactly, and it's an army that when you talk about more on a sort of competitive scale, like I say, because of the sheer randomness, it's like we say, you can't control the randomness, but the more experience you get with the army, you start to learn how it works. And you can go, it's not just a case of, I really hope this goes well, and if it doesn't, I don't really have plan B. Have a plan B. Have something backed up. If you want to go all out and just hope everything goes off, fantastic. 1 in, 5 games, whatever, it'll work and it'll be great. Like you said with your fanatics. But it's an army that rewards experience. So I think we've talked about a lot about the strengths for the army. So, and I think we've touched a bit on the weaknesses, but are there any generic weaknesses you can think of?
Yeah, the biggest weakness that I think that it has is it's not a really good shooting army. It's probably very similar to Death, where it has generically short range shooting. It's not very good. You do have goblins with bows. They're not going to do a lot of damage. There's some Forge World models as well. Colossal Squig, Squig Gobber, the Troll Hag. There are some models out there, like the Squig Gobber that shoots, but they're not a very shooting army. So if you're looking for an army that does a lot of shooting damage, or we are kind of moving into a shooting meta right now, unfortunately, this is a game that you're not going to play. Their magic phase really becomes the shooting phase. So I used to throw a lot of spells, both endless spells and regular spells, and I do know we're now capped to 3 endless spells in a 2,000 point battle as per General's Handbook 2020. So we are limited a little bit to the builds, and you probably can't throw as many endless spells as we would normally, but our magic phase is our shooting phase. That's how we do damage at range. So that's probably the biggest weakness. The second weakness, depending on if you want to look at it as a strength or a weakness, is currently probably the most strongest build out there is goblins. So if you look at who is doing successfully in the tournament scene with Gitz, they are running a lot of goblins. They are hard to take down. They have minuses to hit. They're just a generic horde that comes back, and the allegiance rewards you for that. So if you're not interested in running all the goblins, you're probably not getting as strong in the meta as probably as you could. But again, it's up to you. But shooting is definitely probably the thing. And probably the other one is probably their heroes on average are quite squishy. So you do have some... Yeah, you do have some heroes that have a lot of wounds. Armor saves isn't really their thing. You don't get a lot of really good armor saves. Don't expect 2+ and 3-ups in your army. And a lot of the heroes you have will have 4-up saves, 4 wounds and maybe a mortal wound save if you're lucky. So Hex Gorgeous Skulls from Khorne is the bane of my existence. I remember playing a game against Doom and Darkness, and he threw those Hex Gorgeous Skulls, and I rolled 2 8s, which caused mortal wounds. And I think I popped 3 of my wizards because I tried to cast a spell, and those Hex Gorgeous Skulls triggered me twice. So things like, Everblaze Comet, any of those, anything that can do damage at range and do lots of damage, those goblins are susceptible to dying. So bear that in mind.
So as we say, I mean, I can't... obviously, like we say, there's a shooting meta, and then when lockdown is over across the world and turns out there is no shooting, obviously that's in the future. But if this shooting meta does happen, it's one of those where, because you're squishy heroes, you do want to make the most of hiding behind a Loon Shrine or other scenery pieces, or just general, is it called Lookout Sir, the -1 to hit?
You've got the Lookout Sir, you've got, a lot of your heroes have a 4-up, like the Fungoid Cave Shaman and Scragroth the Loon King have a 4+ after save. All of your Goblin banners have a +1 armor save to shooting from a Knight banner. So there are a lot of things that you can play around with, and obviously the fact as well, if you're running big blocks of 60 goblins, it can be very hard to actually get to those heroes. But if you need to do damage at range, if you're trying to think about how do I kill a Lord Croak, or how do I kill Teclis behind these big blocks of troops, shooting is probably not going to be your answer. And certainly Teclis and Seraphon, like Lord Croak, can make it very tough to do spells. So think about what you can do, and think about what you might need to do in the meta. And that's true whether you play Gitz or not. But think about don't build a strategy a one-trick pony, because you could be in for a bad time.
Yes, if you can prepare for, if your magic does not go off, how is your army going to perform? If I can compare it to when I play Flesh-Eater Courts, now I didn't ever really run mass Terrorgeist lists. I think at one event I ran 2 Terrorgeists, but for me, Flesh-Eater Courts, what made them so strong, if you take away Feeding Frenzy, was getting all their magic off. Like, there's a spell that can do D3 extra attacks, and there's another spell that can give an extra attack from the Ghoul King, and all this is fantastic. But as soon as you play against a Nagash, or what's another one? Or I think a Skaven player, shall we say, with some bells and everything else, and you don't get your magic off, that's when you suddenly learn what is, again, it's like we mentioned earlier about Plan P. Don't think if you take a one strategy with getting spells and using all your command abilities and whatever from your Grot Heroes, and a lot of your Grot Heroes die, and that's your first experience with this army, let's say, don't think my army's rubbish. Just think, what do I need to do to prepare for the new meta? And let's say you really struggle and you can't think of a way to come up with it, metas always change. Shooting was really strong a few years ago, and then I'm thinking when Skyfires came out, and then we didn't really see much shooting for a while. Combat took over, and now this shooting is more, well, I say shooting, it's more of a range threat, isn't it? Because it's more magic we're seeing. And when we say things like salamanders, that is purely because of teleportation that makes them so good.
Yeah, but at the same time with Seraphon, for example, when a Seraphon, the salamanders come from the sky, they've got to be outside of 9 inches from your unit, and they've only got a range of 12. So it really means they can only burn the things that are 3 inches from their teleport or their drop down. Now, the likelihood of that being your character is slim to none, because you're going to have a whole bunch of troops. And because you potentially have so many troops, you can really deny the board. And that's probably one of the biggest strengths of this book, is that because you've got so many models, and you can deny people from, I've never lost to Deepkin, for example, despite all the great players out there that run 27 eels and they reverse the tides and all the crazy stuff that happened to Deepkin. I've never lost a game against Deepkin, and with some very competitive and successful builds. Why? Because I have a perfect counter. I have bodies. I can then release fanatics. The goblins can suck up the mortal wound zap on the charge, and then I can punch them harder than they can punch me. So there is a lot of cool list tailoring, and we've kind of danced around this a few times, but long story short, that's the strength. But then also the weakness is, what I just mentioned, the lack of shooting, very few survivable strong heroes, and there's a whole bunch of other things, but yeah,
that's fair enough. So yeah, we've talked about some strengths and weaknesses. Just sort of a few questions I want to ask that's sort of on topic is so I've asked some subscribers and stuff, and they've asked things like the endless spells that we've got for the Grots. With a lot of armies, it's like endless spells, they tend to be, one of them might be good, none of them are good, or they're all quite good. What are our thoughts with the Gloomspite Gitz spells? Are there any that stand out to you for their endless ones?
The endless spells?
Yeah, like the spiders and everything else.
Yeah, I think, again, depending on the build, I think probably 3 out of the 4, so there are 4 specific Gloomspite Gitz endless spells out there. I think 3 of the 4 have their place in the meta. The 4th one is probably overpointed, and funnily enough, it's the only one that actually went up in points in this new General's Handbook, which is stupid because I don't think it's actually very good. And the meta doesn't reward you for taking it either. So your 4 options: The first one is my personal favorite. I will never leave home without it. If Cities of Sigmar had this access to this endless spell, I would take it every single day of the week. It is just my favorite endless spell out there, and that is Scuttle Tide. It is basically a wall that is summoned. I think it's casting value of 7/6 if you're a spider wizard, and you can put it anywhere on the board as long as it's within 1 inch of a terrain piece. It basically works out to be, wholly within 6 of a terrain piece. It's about 5 inches wide. So why is that important? One, it's 30 points. It's nothing. 30 points is jack. But the cool thing is that you can put it anywhere on the board. So if you've got a little squishy hero at the back, you could be going for that little hero. And basically, when you set it up, you roll 6 dice. On a 5+, you do a mortal wound. So statistically, is it 6? I think statistically it works out to be 2 mortal wounds or 3 mortal wounds. Look at the rules. It works out to be 2 or 3 mortal wounds when you do it. But then every time that models end a move or a charge within 6 inches of it, they also go through that cycle again. So it's an easy way to pick off mortal wounds from your opponent in the back. Or what I like to do is annoy the shit out of my opponent, and I put a wall in front of their deployment zone. So if they can't fly, they're like, well, what do? Do I A, unsummon this particular endless spell, or B, do I walk around it? So I'm basically making them waste a turn. I can then combine that with other endless spells like Palisades or Shackles and create all these, like the Great Wall of Gitz. So I can basically body block a whole bunch of the board space with endless spells. That's one. The second one, you've got the Cauldron. So the Cauldron is one that I won't normally take with my Gitz. Basically what it does is it allows you to take spells from the Gitz spell lore, the Goblin spell lore specifically. This works really well in partnership with the big spider, so the Arachnarok spider. And what it allows you to do is that there's one particular spell that you want in there, and that's called the Hand of Gork. Basically, you pick up a unit that's within 24 inches of the caster, and you put it anywhere on the board so long as within 9 inches of your outside of 9 of your opponent. So stealing an objective at the late game, getting in front of a potentially a squishy hero, or getting somewhere and kind of causing confusion. Or what you could do at times is teleport another wizard, and then they're in range to cast their spell. So there's a lot of things you can do with that. The third one is one that's very underrated, but I love it. It's called the Malevolent Moon. It has a really long threat range. It sets up within 12. It can then move 12. So it has a threat range of 24. It does mortal wounds as it crosses over your opponent, and it also causes a minus to cast within a certain range. It's pretty cheap, but the fact that it has a threat range of 24 inches is one of the highest threat ranges from an endless spell that has a range. Obviously, Scuttle Tide has no range. The last one, which I think is questionable at best, currently 90 points in the new book. It's called Mork's Mighty Mushroom. Basically,
Mushroom Cloud.
Pardon?
Mushroom Cloud, that one, yeah.
Yeah, it's the Mushroom Cloud. It's overcosted. When you set it up, it's random. So you roll 6d6, and that is how far the mushroom can go. I've used it once, and I rolled 13. So 6d6 has a potential of 36 inches. Which is great, but basically anything within 8 inches of it, I think it's on a 5+ or a 4+ takes a mortal wound. So if this was a horde meta, lots of Skaven, lots of bodies, that would work really well. We are very much in an elite type meta, so you don't do a lot of mortal wounds. And for 90 points, it's quite expensive. 80 points currently, 90 points in the new book.
Yeah, that's
and I'm only allowed to take 3 endless spells right now. I can tell you right now, I'd rather Geminids, I'd rather Quicksilver Swords, there are so many more, the Pendulum, they are endless spells that I do damage as opposed to a stupid mushroom.
That could potentially just do damage to your army as well, depending on how far you get. So, out of the ones you've mentioned, some good points there. The Scuttle Tide, I think, like you've mentioned before, it just adds towards the board denial. Yeah, for the army. If I was to compare it to when I've played like the odd 1000 point of Bone Reapers, a spell that they have I love is the I think it's called the Soul Seeker Carrion, the bird that's draining the souls. Yeah. And to be honest, I cast that when I've had those games every time. Can't really remember what its rules do. However, you can set up anywhere on the board, and then it's a big sort of circle base that can block off in between two scenery pieces just to stop the other thing. That's the other thing with ender spells, because that only costs 20 points. If there are cheap ender spells but they have big bases, that means such a good way to use them in different ways. Don't just read the rules and think that's the only point. But the Scuttle Tide I do quite like. Also, I know someone who tried to paint each spider in a slightly different colour. So like the first, don't know how many major colours there are, like the first 9 are all different, and then the others are like light blue, dark blue, and then shortly
Madness.
And I think shortly after that like Contrast came out, and then he was a bit gutted that he could have waited. But no, they are.
I will say as well, like, remember that Malign Sorcery as we currently know it is no longer available. So if we continue on this trajectory and the only artifacts that we have is the new General's Handbook artifacts, and we don't have access to Malign Sorcery artifacts, assuming Games Workshop don't come out and change the rules on us, it means there's no Thermal Rider Cloak. So things that are flying now, let's say a Stonehorn, for example, we can block them off, and they're not going to be able to. And ogres don't traditionally have a lot of spellcasters, if any. So you could block off a Stonehorn or deny it from charging you in the early game with that, and it doesn't have the Thermal Rider Cloak anymore. So again, there's no Thermal Rider Cloak Keepers of Secrets as well, so they're going to be jumping over screens and getting in your face. For 30 points, it is an absolute steal.
Yeah, it's great. And sort of what we were talking about before with some of the weaknesses of the army, squishy heroes trying to hide behind blocks. Now that there's going to be fewer big scary things that can fly, it's only going to help. So, you know, there are good things and bad things come with the changes. On a quick one with Malign Sorcery and Realms about the new edition, from what we can see, new edition, the General's Handbook, from what we can see, I personally am a fan of that. I think it streamlines the games nicer. I personally think, even who's someone who ran a zombie dragon with a vampire on it with an ethereal amulet, I'm quite happy that we're going to see some vampire lords buy other stuff from this shop that's in Shaiish. I think will be cool. And it just streamlines a lot of games. I don't know about yourself, but here in the UK, a lot of the tournaments picked 1 or 2 spells from each realm and stuff like that. And I think it's a nice change. I've just heard a lot of people talk about it online, so I just wanted to.
There's pros and cons on either side, but I guess, you know, the wonderful thing about Age of Sigmar is you take what you want out of it. So I suspect tournaments will still run with Malign Sorcery. Some won't. Some will choose realm spells. Some won't. I think that's what creates the event schedule and makes it fun, is that every tournament organizer will put their different spin on it. So I am absolutely excited to see what other artifacts come out of the different realms, and I can't wait to see more people use artifacts that are inherent in their book. There is a wonderful artifact that I will always take in this particular book called the Moonface Moment, which is an awesome artifact. So there's plenty of cool artifacts in here. And instead of taking the Griffeather Charm, which is a very popular Gitz endless spell, we're forced to try some different ones, like the Clammy Cow. We can try a whole bunch of different endless artifacts.
Yeah, it just and it, like I say, you can be as narrative as you want in your game, but I kind of like it for myself. It sort of forces you a little bit more towards the narrative, rather than everyone from all different races in the mortal realms having the same amulet or charm or whatever. So no, I think it's nice. And of course, if you're not happy with the changes, and let's say you don't go to many tournaments, just playing like a group, so no one's stopping you using the old rules. I still know some people who prefer like a playing the General's Handbook from like a couple of years ago, and between their group of friends, it's fine. There's nothing telling you how you should play with your toys between your friends.
It's your hobby. Hashtag it's your hobby. Should I talk about the allegiance abilities? I feel like we haven't even talked about that.
Sorry. I do this in all my videos. There's sort of a straight line when it comes to lore, and then I sort of drift off and talk about something else and drag whoever is with me down.
No, that's fine. Like I'm more than happy to go on the route, but I'm thinking at least let me tell you what you get for putting your eggs in this basket.
Please do.
So you're going to get some stuff. So as every battle tome, you get stuff. Now, we talked about the allegiance ability is random. So this is where it all starts. It's the bad moon. So what you do is you put a little token on the side of the board. It happens in a quadrant, and much like a moon, it goes from one side of the board to the other. If you look at the book on page 61, you will find the movement or the way it works. But basically, you split the board up into quadrants of 4. When the bad moon radiates over different parts of the board, it will do different things. So I mentioned to you before that you can build a whole army of squigs, or you could mix and match and have squigs and spiders, spiders and trogs and gits. You can mix it however you want to mix it. Depending on the build of your army, that will depend on the benefits that you get. So when the bad moon light shines over the parts of the board, spellcasters become better. They get +1 to their cast. You make opponents cast spells a bit harder. It's a -1 to their cast. You can do damage to a unit. You can do up to D3 damage depending, and it probably rewards you more for larger units. It's not very good to kill your opponent's characters, but and there's some mechanics that you can read yourself, but there's some damage dealing stuff there. Squigs can run and charge. Goblins can reroll ones to hit. Trolls heal, so they double the amount of wounds that they heal. Spiders do mortal wounds on a 5 instead of a 6. And there might be something else. But so basically, yeah. So but the cool thing is that the way this all works is the token starts on one corner. And you can choose any of the 4 corners on the board. So you could even start it in your opponent's territory. You roll a dice at the top of every battle round. On a roll of a 1, doesn't move. Roll a 2 to a 5, it moves 1 spot. On a roll of a 6, it moves 2 spots. So there's been plenty of times where I've set up the bad moon and I've rolled 3 1s in a row. So I've gotten the bad moon to move in the 5th battle round. But then there are times where it'll zip completely into the center of the board. So again, this is where that randomness comes in. Oh, and you also get an extra command point. And one of the other strengths is
I was going to say
you'll probably end the battle with about 10 to 12 command points, and you've spent them along the way.
So just a note on that. When I see everyone talk about Gloomspite Gitz, they go, oh, they're all shitting command points and everything. But just for someone who's brand new to Gloomspite Gitz and they've seen this everywhere, they get so many command. How do they? Is there lots of different sources where they get them from?
Yeah, so you obviously get 1 command point at the start of the battle round. If you have a Fungoid Cave Shaman on a 4+, you generate a command point. If you take Scraggroth the Loon King on a 4+, you generate D3 command points.
D3.
If the bad moon is shining the light over the general, there is 1 command point there. There's just so many command points.
That's enough for me to answer the questions.
Command points for battalions, command point for you to buy 1. If you're wholly within 12 of your Loon Shrine, which is your Allegiance terrain piece, your unit is immune to Battle Shock as well. So you don't have to spend a command point for Battle Shock if you're within 12 of the Loon Shrine. So if the bad moonlight is shining on your Gitz, you're rerolling ones to hit, so you don't have to burn the command point to use that ability anyway, so you're getting it for free. So it's just, I will literally end a game with probably minimum 9 command points, 12 to 15, and I've been spending them along the way. So you never have to worry about command points.
So something of the army, if you're thinking about, like, is it worth doing the reroll charge? Just do it. Those little commands, not even a question. Also, if you're not aware of the, which I'll be honest, like sometimes I can't completely remember what they are, but like now, for instance, when you look at the General's Handbook, presuming they're still there in the new one, there's like the 3 extra generic ones. We get, the Inspiring Presence.
All 6 are still there.
Reroll like
all 6 are still there. Yeah.
So
reroll hits of 1 in shooting and in combat. You reroll 1s to save, reroll charge, 6 to run, Inspiring Presence. Which is actually really good because one of the builds in Lumineth Realm Lords right now is it a spell or an ability?
I think it's a spell
that makes you makes you spend 2 command points for 1. So if you want to use Inspiring Presence, it's going to cost you 2 command points instead of 1. But you're going to be like, yeah, cool, no problem. I got command points for day. Look, let me shout you on your next Inspiring Presence. That's how many command points I've got.
And especially if you're new to this game, that's Gloomspite Gitz are one of the only armies that can kind of go, well, I have to spend 2 command points, that's fine, that's the economy at the moment, that's what I have to do. They're the only army that doesn't mind doing that. Everyone else is, if I look at Legions, sometimes I'll really stress about spending an extra 50 points to get that command point and then suddenly it gets taken away from me, then it can jeopardize whole strategies. Gloomspite Gitz, another strength, like we said, is they don't really care. So, and sorry, just to go back to the allegiance abilities that you were talking about. So to summarize those, they're nice bonuses, but don't rely on them. Is that fair enough? Because you don't know where the bad light of the moon is going to be on the board.
Yeah, there is one way to get reliability from the bad moon, and that is from Skragrott the Loon King. Skragrott Loon King is a named character. He is the Loon King. His lore is he is a goblin wizard, and essentially he has captured all of these smart people, wizards, priests, people who just study books, you name it, the smartest people. And he captures them, hits them with his staff. It's called Damoon on a stick, and he basically encaptures them in this little underground layer. And they study the bad moon and they go crazy. It's like an asylum, but it allows him to be better at the bad moon. And once per battle, for a command point, he can choose that dice roll. So you've got to do it before you make the roll. So you could say, I want the bad moon to move 1 spot, 2 spots, or no spots. If it's in the center of the board, it affects the entire table. So if you're really lucky and it bounces into the middle, you could make it stay there for a round. Or you could know that in turn 2, I'm going to spend that command point and I'm going to move it straight into the board. That allows me then to take advantage. So you could set yourself up for 1 turn, and then everything else is kind of lucky. Otherwise, there's no way to control the bad moon.
Fair enough. So if you want to try and control it, you're going to be taking the Loon King. If you're not too bothered, it's fine, you don't have to take him. And that sort of comes into my next question. Was a lot of the time with these armies, they'll have a named character, and then there's a question of, should I take them? Are they good to take? Or quite often it's, I like them, but I don't know if they're competitive enough to put in my tournament list, for example. What are our thoughts on the Loon King? Obviously, it depends on your build, but is he someone that could be worth taking, one of those named characters?
Depending on your build. So, short answer, yes. Now, if you take Skragrott the Loon King as your general, you may deny yourself battle line. There might be certain things where, for example, particular squigs only become battle line if your general is X. Or spiders, again, you might have to have an Arachnarok, or you might have a particular spider to be your general in order to... so, for example, the Fellwater Troggoths, your vomiting trogs, they only become battle line if you have the Dankhold Trog boss as the general. So if you want to go towards a dominant or all Trog list, then Skragrott's not for you. Same is true with spiders. If you want the spider riders, your Gitz general must be a Spider Fang general. So that might be your Arachnarok, for example. Skragrott is great if you're going to run a heavy goblin list. Not so well if you're going to do any other build. There are some really cool builds, for example, with the Mangler Squig, the Loon boss on Mangler Squig. And there's a rule called Fight Another Day, where basically after he strikes in combat, he bounces out immediately. So he doesn't even get, the opponent doesn't get to fight him back. So that's a really cool rule if you go squigs. But if you take him, he's great. Otherwise, you're denying yourself from battle line.
Cool. At least he has got good points. There are some known characters out there that are just clearly not worth taking. So that's cool. He's a nice model. He's quite small as well, isn't he? Because he's a garrote at the end of the day. He's
quite small. I think one of the things that you don't notice with Skragrott the Loon King is I mentioned his little staff. He's Damoon on a stick. He's a great little wizard. He's a double caster. He gets pluses to cast and unbind. But my favourite parts of Skragrott the Loon King is 2 things. First off, his ranged attack. So his little wizard staff does 6 attacks, and I think at 28-inch range, which is crazy, right? Hits on 3s, wounds on 3s. If a model suffers a wound from it and doesn't die, every battle round it will continue to take 1 mortal wound. So the model just keeps taking mortal wounds as you go, which is pretty brutal. The other one is he has a spell, and it's called Nick It. Nick It cast on an 8. if you roll a 10, and it does D3 damage.
Yep.
If you roll a 10 plus, you steal the person's artifact. So if I cast it on your Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, you have the Ethereal Amulet, and I roll that 10, I've stolen your Amulet. You do not have Ethereal Amulet anymore.
That's that's one of those things. If you were to do it to, well, you do it to me, or I imagine some other players as well, I'll just sort of stand there and like, okay, that's a thing, and I love it because it's not like really powerful. It's not like if he casts it on a 7 it happens. It's those little unique things, and like I don't know, like yeah,
it's D3 mortal wounds, which is nice. He obviously gets +1 to the cast. You know, if you can get some additional ways to cast, it's a bonus. But I have done a few times where I have stolen that sort of judgment. I have stolen that really powerful realm artifact, or that really powerful artifact from the book. And it's like, what? Wait a second. What? So you essentially render the artifact useless. So they do not have it anymore. So any benefits they would get from that artifact no longer exists if you're able to get that 10 plus and do some damage.
That's cool. So I just, yeah, it's one of those great rules, and something for the army, and something for me. Like you might have heard, like sometimes when you've been talking about things, I've been sniggering and laughing a little bit. It's just because I love the names. Like, isn't there an ability for the squigs that's just called boing 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 or something like that? From what I remember, there's just so many.
There are so many cool rules, and obviously I'm talking a lot about Gitz, but you know there are things like the colossal squig or the mangler squig, which are just absolutely crazy. The colossal squig, which is a Forge World model, when it dies, it blows up and does mortal wounds like a Terrorgeist does, but then it also sets up a unit of regular little squigs. So it blows up and it turns into little squigs, and I can't even count on my hands how many times I've seized an objective by killing my colossal squig, doing a whole bunch of damage, and then setting up a small little unit of squigs, and they've claimed an objective. So, I mean, that is another little brilliant thing. There are so many fun little, like, you can make people fight last, you can teleport, as I've mentioned, like the trolls vomit, like they do like rend -2 damage vomits. The Troggoth Hag, another Forge World model, she can make you. She's -1 to hit. She can cast a spell that's another -1 to hit. There's been times where I've had her at like -3 to hit. So she's this absolute tank that heals D6 wounds every hero phase. She vomits and does a whole bunch of damage, and she just keeps healing, right? So you just can't kill her. It's almost like, why am I even bothering? And then you've got things like the Gobblepalooza, which are these 5 little goblin heroes that run around, and they all are quirky as hell. And then you've got things like the Boingrot Bounders, where they're just like bouncing squig knights who do some mortal wounds on the charge, and they fly, and it's just crazy fun, crazy cool.
It's one of those, and especially with you've just said them, but I've forgotten them. The nightly squig hoppers, the
Boingrot Bounders.
If you ever wanted your squig hoppers to have more sort of chivalry or sort of more heroicness to them, or a knightly order, there's your answer. It's been made for you, which is great. And I'm sure they're the sort of things you're talking about. If you want to get a bit of rend in the army and stuff, you've got reasons there. The rules are just so flavoursome. Rather than just this ability allows you to heal D3 wounds in the hero phase, read the name of it. It's great. So
even the battalions, you've got Squigalanche, you've got this like that in itself, the Moon Clan Scrap, Gobblepalooza. Like, it's a circus of like 5 or 6 little goblins that just run around and they buff things up. It's so funny. The Trog Herd, the Squig Rider Stampede, the Scuttle Tide, the Loon Shrine. There's just even like little things like there's a model set called the Sneaky Snufflers. What they are is they've bred these like little goblins, right? And they've in our human world, people who hunt for truffles.
Yep.
They'll breed these certain pigs, and these pigs go out and hunt truffles. Imagine the same concept, but for goblins. So these goblins have these trained squigs. They go out and instead of looking for truffles, they go for these death cap mushrooms, and those mushrooms are like super powered, and they make wizards cast better. And there's a whole bunch of wizards by there that have these like once per game mushrooms that give them pluses to cast or double their casting, and some cool stuff there. But like the models are literally a goblin with a little rope leash with the squig pig hunting for truffle mushrooms. Now, if that is an army, and you've listened to me now for about an hour, and if that doesn't sound like a whole bunch of fun, and they're quite good because they make your goblins +1 attack. So there's an easy way to get your goblins to do 3 attacks each, doing mortal wounds on 6s to wound. So there's an easy way that your goblins could be putting out like 20 mortal wounds in a round of combat with a few buffs. So they look great and they perform well.
They're great, and everything you just described about them, I've got them on the screen now, and they are, the size of the squig's nose is about the size of its rest of its body. They're absolutely lovely. If I was to buy one box of Gloomspite Gitz, it would be these guys, because I think they're just amazing. You can tell the rule writers who came up with the Gloomspite Gitz really did have. They always say they have fun creating all the rules, but you can generally tell with these guys they must have had a blast. Okay, just another question I've got from a subscriber for you is, and I felt like this one was going to come up because if no one asked it, I would have asked it. If I was to fully run a Gloomspite Gitz army, I would only go Troggoths. Can I make it a viable build? So I know it won't be the most competitive, but will it do all right?
Define viable. Like what does that mean?
Like
what's your definition of viable?
So the second part is, do you have any good like suggestions on this? Like how would you here we go. How would you get the most out of the Troggoths? Yeah. There we go.
Cool. Okay. Well, first things first. Are they viable? Yes. Are they going to go 5-0 at a tournament? Probably not. I had a wonderful chat with the Trog boss himself, Stuart Hodges. We had a wonderful 90-minute chat all about of Trogs. So we've actually done a few list shows. Obviously, that was GBH 19. I don't think they've changed much in the new
I'll put that
update.
in the description below. So if you want more in depth, you can go check that out. And that'll be done.
Check that out. So if you're looking for a couple of lists, we do have some. In my personal opinion, I would not run a pure Trog list. And the reason I would not do that is because I think there's one significant issue that it doesn't do, and it has no screens. So if any army is going to alpha strike you, teleport, come from the sky, come from the side of the board, you don't have a lot of models to be able to deny or backboard or leave on an objective. And that's why if I was going to run a Trog list, I would at least want 1 or 2 units of grots, maybe 20-man units or 40-man units, but I'd want some screens because your trolls are great, but you don't want them taking the punch. Yes, they can heal, but you don't want to be screening with these very expensive elite big-based models.
Well, it gets to the point, doesn't it, where the trolls can do quite a lot of damage, but if they've been charged and you have no trolls left, then you can't do the things you really want to do with them. So
yeah, and I mean, if I had 2 units of grots in front of the trogs, and they could be vomiting over the screen, the grots could take the hit, and then they could pile in and do some damage. I think that would be a better build. But if I had no interest in painting grots, could I run 2,000 points of trolls? Yes. I would suggest going to buy the Troll Hag from Forge World. I think she is hands down a fantastic model, and she probably brings to the table something that the Trog only lists don't have, and that is a spellcaster, and it's a strong, reliable hero. That Troll Hag is like 14, 16 wounds. I think the Dank Hold is like, 8, 10? It's not nearly as good as the Troggoth Princess.
It's not a monster at the end of it. It's not like a monster with a multi-wounding chart and everything like that.
Yeah. So for me, that Troll Hag definitely brings something to the competitive landscape if you were going to Trogs only.
Cool. Well, there's your answer. So you can make it work. In summary, if you want more information on it, like I say, go down the description. There'll be a link. But so it's not going to be most competitive, but you can make it work. You can have fun with it. It's not you put it on the table and the game's over. you can have.
I think you'll have a tough time against certain armies. I think there'll be some armies that if you went 100% Trogs, I think you'd have a bad time. I would spend 20% of my points, 10% of my points, even one unit of Grots at 20 Grots is like 130, 140 points. Even just spending 10% on one unit, I think would help significantly. But again, if it's not your cup of tea, you don't have to do it. Please don't think that that's the only way to build Trogs. Squigs could do the same as well. You might want to have a little unit of Squig hoppers or just cave Squigs, Squig herd they're called now, just for a screen.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like it's not like when you have to ally in a unit. The stabbers and like a Squig herd, for example, they are part of the army. They will benefit from allegiance abilities and stuff. So it's up to you. But if you want to go completely narrative, you could probably say this with everything. But go to your heart's content. You will still have fun. So with that, sort of to bring it home now, as we've talked so much about the Gitz, and like I said, if you want more, we've both done lots of videos on them. What would be, for someone who's still watching this, word on you, what would be a good way to start the army? Because obviously they've got a recent start collecting box.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know is that Battle Force still knocking around? They had a Battle Force, didn't they? But I think it's probably gone out from. Let's
assume no.
Yeah,
let's assume no. So where would I start? So my advice is always start with the rule of cool. So find the model that draws you the most. I think, much like our discussion with Cities of Sigmar, you are at risk of analysis paralysis. You look at one model, then you look at a different model, and there are so many units in there, it's hard to choose where to start. So my advice to you would be to find the starting point. Are you inspired by Gitz, by Trogs, by Spiders, by Squigs? And by the way, I haven't really talked about it, but you've also got a Gargant in the list as well. Yeah. So you do have the Gargant that you can bring to the table as well. So, and who knows what the new Gargants are going to do, if anything, with these guys, but they do have the regular smaller Gargant.
They
so
can
that's
be
in the that's in the book. So they get Allegiance stuff, and they are a part of the book. So where would I start? So there are some really cool builds. There's not a lot of start collecting boxes specifically for this box, and that's actually kind of all right as well, because I do find personally maybe the start collecting boxes that I've seen in the past aren't probably the build that you would probably make. I think from memory it was a combination Trog Squig, which I would.
So I was just gonna say I've got it up at the moment. So you've got 3 of the new trolls, can't remember what they're called. The
rock guts. The rock guts.
That's it. You've got a Squig herd, and then you've got a loom boss with the yellow helmet.
So I probably wouldn't personally run in that combination, and I've already explained the reasons why, going full Trog or Trogs and Gitz. I have run Gitz and Squigs, but I certainly, because Gitz and Trogs and Squigs perform very similar roles. They're very elite. One is more durable. One's more of a hammer. One's more of an anvil. But they are very similar in the way they cost a lot of points. So where would I start? I would find a model I love, whether it's Gragroth the Loon King, whether it is the Rock Guts, whether it is a Ragnarok Spider, whether it is a bunch of Boingrot Bounders. I'd find that model and I'd build around it. The battalions are very fruitful, so they do reward you for a good build, and the builds are quite good. So I would pick up the book and I would just start with a small force, 500 points. They synergize quite well. Then from there, I would honestly, I would just keep playing and just trying to find what you enjoy the most. The Trogs, for example, aren't as random as the Squigs. So if you find that you're really frustrated with some of the Squigs and the randomness, maybe find the Spiders and the Trogs, because they are less random than the Squigs. So you'll find your flavor. That I don't think you'll go wrong with any of your builds. I look at my cabinet here, and I'm happy with all of my choices, and I run different builds, and they bring different things to the table. So
I think
I would just pick something that you would just enjoy painting and start from there. Whether it's squigs, whether it's trogs, whether it gits. Gits are certainly easier to paint now than they were when I started them. So there was no contrast paint right there. So with my Gitz robes, I'd paint like 3 layers of Nuln oil to get that glistening robes.
Yeah,
that you can now do with 1 contrast layer. So
yeah,
you're in a lucky golden age.
I've got a buddy of mine who I believe since the start of lockdown here in the UK, he's done 3 batch paints of 60 of them. And he would have gone insane if it wasn't for contrast. So it can be done. It can be done. And I painted
160 to 180 battle line grots with a spray of Mechanicus and then 3 coats of Nuln oil. 3 coats of Nuln oil on 180 grots.
Are you in a padded room at the moment, or did you manage to contain your sanity?
I think I am in the Lunar Asylum. But yeah, like the contrast paints go great, and you know, if you go squigs, the trogs are wonderful because they've got so much definition, so the contrast goes really well. The spiders, again, you can get a really nice vibrant black spider with the blacks or the blacky grey. So again, like the world's your oyster.
Contrast is your friend in this army.
Yeah, if you want to go down that route, they do look well.
That's good, and I think like the point we're finishing on, it's like we sort of said towards the start of the video, was there's no certain way you feel like you're forced to do it. Do it however you like. And I think with that, is there anything else, any last points you would like to say about the Gloomspite Gitz?
Let me throw a couple of, for anyone who wants to know some of the rules. Let me call out a couple of. I've got my battle tome in front of me right now. I'm going to call out a couple of rules for anyone's like, this sounds great, I'm really inspired, but actually tell me something about the army. So I'm going to call out a couple of things from the book that might help you along the way. So from a command trait point of view, some things that you might really enjoy. Things like Fight Another Day is great for squigs. Basically, that general is going to bounce out of combat after it's attacked, which is really cool. It means that, you could hit your opponent really hard and then avoid being hit themselves. You can, there's things like, what else is there? There's, I'm looking at, there's some great ways to get some additional spells, some additional mortal wounds. When I look at some of the things like, there's some wonderful builds, but like when I look at some of the artifacts, things like the Clammy Cow, you get a -1 to hit from attacks. So again, I talked about there's some wonderful different ways to get minuses to hit, or additional things like 5-up after saves. Things like the Moonface Mommet, again, another a -1 to armor saves, which is a really nice one. There are a whole bunch of spells that I really like. Things like the Great Green Spite, which is one that's very thematic. The wizard looks at this unit of Gitz, and the bigger the unit that gets, the more damage it's going to do. So basically, you harness the power of a unit of Gitz, and then you cast this supercharged arcane bolt from it. So it can do like D6 damage. You can make people fight last. Itchy Nuisance. Hand of Gork is a teleporting. Again, I could go through all the different spells, all the different artifacts, but I think check out Agent Nagash. You've got a whole bunch of different videos. Go check them out. Go check out mine. Go do some searches. I'll probably do some more list reviews now that we've got a new General's Handbook to see how the Gitz, what's a viable Gitz build in the new meta. So look out for those videos in the future.
I think that's great. The only other last thing I just want to quickly say, because we've mentioned Forge World. If you have bought yourself a Gloomspite Battle Tome, and I love that stick. If you've got yourself a Gloomspite Battle Tome, don't think they're all the units you have. You can go onto Forge World, and there's I think like 4 more or something you can add into the army.
There's one that I haven't talked about.
What was that?
There's one I haven't talked about. The Bone Grinder Gargant.
I'll get him up.
There is this Gargant. So if Mikey, you're going to bring this up, this Gargant is like the world's largest model. Forget putting it in a carry case. His model is insanely big, but it is. So you've got your regular Gargant, and then you have this Bone Grinder Gargant. So it is a chunk of money, but it is Forge World. So if you want to tap into Forge World, you have the Colossal Squig, you have the Squig Gobber, you have the Troggoth Hag, you've got this. The Bone Grinder, and you've got the Rogue Idol. And the Rogue Idol makes your wizards better to cast as well. So not only is it strong, and that's why your Savage Oryx are taking them, but also it's a really good caster, so it gives you +1 or +2 to the cast for wizards around it. So a couple of Forge World models you can tap into, in addition to what's your Battle Tome.
And the Night Goblin command set, although I don't think they bring any extra rules, they're good replacements for some of the... Do you like them?
Really good. I've got one with the banner. I've also got the Wizard. The Wizard is a really cool wizard. Another really cool wizard, by the way, is Zarbag. So the Underworld's warband Zarbag Gitz. That wizard is a wonderful little wizard. So I don't know if it's out of print or it's about to go out of print, but I would highly recommend picking up Zarbag's Gitz. I wouldn't use the War Scrolls for the actual unit, but I would use that model as a replicated. As a madcap shaman. Yeah. Very good.
Exactly. Rather than, I think I remember seeing, I don't know if it was just my locomotor, but I remember seeing loads of the ones from the Battle of Skull Pass still knocking around, because I don't think they've been sold for a while.
And if you're on eBay and you're looking for a cheap way to start this army, the 7th edition, 8th edition had this box set called the Battle of Skull Pass, which came with these monoposed spiders, spider riders. You had some goblin archers and goblin spearmen. You had a shaman in there, maybe a loon boss. So if you, and maybe even some old Fellwater trolls. So if you are in the second-hand market and you can pick one of those up, is a cheap way of getting into the Gitz.
Fantastic. Well,
but they are monoposed, so they're not as dynamic as the new models.
No, they're not as dynamic. I will. Say good job to Games Workshop for updating a lot of the models, though. I think they did a really good job on that. Not adding loads of new War Scrolls, they added a few, but they just did a lovely job of freshening them up and making them plastic, which was great.
I will counter your point and say that the first time I ran Gloomspite Gitz was at CanCon 2019. So CanCon is the world's largest Age of Sigmar event. This year in 2020, it was 240 players. The year before, it was 220 players. I ran Gloomspite Gitz. The book came out 2 weeks before the event. I had to submit my list 24 hours after the book was released, and half the models were still coming out. So thank you for all the new models, but also it caused me an absolute nightmare to get painted. But as I look back at all of my models, I'm so proud and so excited with the range. So not a single regretful purchase in that range. So find somewhere to start and just pick it up. Just pick it up and have fun. I can't stress enough how much it's a great army to paint, play, and build.
Fantastic. Well, Anthony, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much for bringing your... Is it a product? Because I thought that was the one by the Loonkin, or was that just a...
This is just a splitter. So it's not the product, but it is. I have the Hammer of Sigmar to my left, but I've got my Prodder, my cutter. I think this is what the Boingrop Bounders jump around with, but I thought at least I'd wear that with my Bad Moon shirt. So
always brilliantly dressed.
I'll for anyone who's listened to this as this long, I'll give them one more secret, and I swear I'll shut up. It's the Bad Moon. You're probably wondering, how do I represent the Bad Moon? How I represent the Bad Moon is you can buy the Goblin Blood Bowl starter kit. So it's $50 for the team. We'll go on to eBay and you can buy this. And there's a little token, a little circle token that they would use to say that's their turn. And it's a Bad Moon. It's literally a gold coin shaped size with a little Bad Moon token. I bought it for $2 on eBay. A lot of bitch traders sell them. And that is my Bad Moon token. So I put it on the table, and there's my token that doesn't interfere with the table, but knows where the Bad Moon is. There's my ending thing for anyone who's listened to this long.
A great little bit of insight. Cool. Well, like I say, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for sharing your experience, because like when I talk about the armies, I can sort of only, when it's army I don't do, I only talk about it from a bit of an outsider point of view, so it's great to have insight. And pick up that battle tome if you're interested, guys. I hope by at this point you've decided it's an army for you. If it's not an army for you and you're still listening, thank you very much for sticking along. And no,
don't thank them. Screw you. Go watch this video. Go buy the battle tome. Don't bring shame to your family. Start this army today. There is no better time to be a Gitz player than right now. Screw the meta. Go stab some people in the knee. Eat some mushrooms. Have fun.
Start being sneaky. Okay, well, like I say, Anthony, thank you very. I think this is the third time, so this is better than last time, so that's all right.
No, I'm pretty sure last time you tried to wrap up 3 times. I kept hijacking you, so this is the third time. I'm going to shut up. Thank you very much. If you enjoyed this video, I do what I did last time. I'm going to wrap up your show. Don't forget, we have a Patreon page here, Age of Nagash. If you've liked the video, like, subscribe, comment below. YouTube loves the comment section, so they would appreciate it if you left some comments and told them how amazing I am, or how you feel sorry for Mikey to bloody put up with my shit for this long. I hope your show isn't PC, by the way, because you haven't been demonetized for my swearing. But yeah, look, like, subscribe, do all that stuff, share it, put it on Twitter, share it to your friends, and tell them why this was the best show on the internet. So do all that stuff, and smash the Patreon as well. Every dollar counts. It goes back into the show. It might actually fix up his computer, because every time we've tried to record, this is like 10 minutes late for some system update. It's always hot garbage. So please get this man a new computer. He desperately needs it.
It's an absolute nightmare. On that point, I literally it's Anthony's evening, it's my morning. I will check it first thing I get up to make sure it works, then turn off the computer, and then start up again about 20 minutes before we're scheduled to start. And it will just, that 20 minutes is incredibly stressful. But what I want to say is thank you very much for your kind words. If there's anything that Anthony here has said, anything that's caused distress, you can inbox me. It's fine. We can talk about this. We can discuss it. But no, this certainly is not PC. I gave up on that a long time ago. Okay, so thank you very much for joining us. Absolutely great. I can't wait to talk to you a bit more when we get the 2020 and we've had a good look at it, to see what's changed with the armies. And right, guys, so thank you very much for watching. I hope that everyone's staying safe, washing your hands, all that sort of thing, of course, because some countries are dealing with this better than others. And yeah, and remember, guys, until next time, Nagash is all, and all is one in Nagash.
Stab him in the knee.